Galactic Council warned aliens to fear humans, but they didn't listen in the vast stretches of the galaxy, far beyond Earth's reach. The Galactic Council met in a grand chamber. The chamber was a place where the most ancient and powerful species in the galaxy gathered to discuss matters of great importance. These beings were ancient, their civilizations spanning millennia, their technology far beyond anything humanity could imagine. They ruled with a sense of pride, convinced that their advanced knowledge and power made them untouchable by any species that had yet to prove themselves. But there was one species that had caught their attention: humans. At first, they considered them insignificant, a young race with barely any grasp of space travel. They were chaotic, violent, and unpredictable. However, the humans had a history of surviving against all odds. They had weathered war, disease, and internal conflict. And in recent decades, they had begun to venture into space, pushing the boundaries of their world and encountering alien species for the first time. Captain Adrian Wolf, a seasoned military officer, was one of the few humans who had been in direct contact with the Galactic Council. His presence at the meeting was a reminder of humanity's growing influence. His face was calm, his eyes sharp, as he stood before the council members waiting for the proceedings to begin. The members of the council, 8 distinct species from across the galaxy, sat in their high thrones, observing Wolf with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. To them, humans were still seen as nothing more than a curiosity, a species with potential, but not one worth fearing. One of the council members, a being from the Zorvok Empire, spoke first. The Zorvoks were tall, their translucent skin shimmering like polished stone, their voices deep and commanding. "Captain Wolf," it began, its voice reverberating through the room, "we have watched your people for some time. You've managed to survive wars, epidemics, and all manner of disaster. But do you truly believe you are ready to stand among the great civilizations of the galaxy?" Captain Wolf stood tall, his expression unchanging. "I don't believe we are just ready to stand. We're ready to lead," he replied calmly. His words, simple as they were, seemed to carry weight in the room. For the first time, the council members hesitated, sensing the conviction in his tone. Another member, an ancient being from the Zelnar, spoke next. The Zelnar had lived for thousands of years, their minds vast, filled with knowledge beyond comprehension. They had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. "You are a species of short-lived beings with no respect for the harmony of the galaxy. Your violence, your wars, this is not the way of the universe." Wolf's eyes narrowed slightly. "We may be short-lived, but we fight for what we believe in, and we don't give up, ever." A murmur rippled through the council members. The Zorvok leader raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You dare claim that your people in all their frailty could pose a threat to us?" "Not a threat," Wolf replied, his voice steady. "A challenge. Humanity will not simply bow to you or anyone else. We will carve our own path, no matter the obstacles." The room fell silent for a long moment. The council members exchanged looks, some dismissive, others thoughtful. They had heard many speeches from many species, all claiming they would change the galaxy, but none had done so. Humanity, though, was different. There was something in their spirit that set them apart. But that was precisely why the council members weren't worried. They were too far ahead of humanity in terms of power, technology, and wisdom. The conversation turned to the human race's growing presence in the galaxy. It was undeniable that they had begun to spread out, sending ships to nearby star systems. They had already made first contact with several species, and some, like the Grawn, had expressed interest in trading with them. However, the council knew that the humans lacked the technological prowess to truly challenge the established order of the galaxy. At least, that's what they thought. Captain Wolf spoke again, his voice now slightly more forceful. "The universe is not yours to own. It belongs to everyone, and humanity will not sit in the shadows while you build your empire." The council remained unconvinced. They had watched the humans struggle to keep their own planet in check for centuries. They had seen how they fought amongst themselves, how divided they were. The council believed that the same divisions would prevent humanity from ever becoming a true galactic power. But they had made one grave mistake. They had underestimated humanity's potential. Wolf knew it. And while the council saw them as a chaotic species, he understood that their unpredictability was their strength. As the meeting drew to a close, Wolf turned to leave. He looked back one last time, meeting the eyes of the council members. "Remember my words," he said quietly. You may think we are small, but we are resilient, and one day you'll see that we are not just surviving, we are thriving." The council members exchanged uneasy glances, sensing something they hadn't before, doubt. But they still didn't truly believe the threat that humanity posed. They were too confident in their superiority to take Wolf's words seriously. And as they dismissed him, they believed that nothing would ever change. They had seen it all before: empty threats, failed rebellions, and fleeting hopes. But Captain Wolf knew something they didn't. He knew that humanity was capable of more than anyone could imagine. And though the council had dismissed them, the time would soon come when they would regret underestimating the human spirit. As Wolf left the chamber, the first faint whispers of change began to stir in the galaxy. The seeds of a revolution had been planted, and humanity would soon make its mark on the stars. The news of Captain Wolf's meeting with the Galactic Council spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Many species had heard of humanity's rapid growth, but they didn't believe it would amount to much. The humans were still a young species, with limited resources compared to the advanced civilizations that had ruled for centuries. Yet something in the way Wolf had spoken stirred a sense of unease in the hearts of many. Days passed, and the council, confident in their power, continued their deliberations. They brushed off Wolf's words as the empty threats of a primitive species. But deep within the chambers of their high citadel, a small group of aliens began to reconsider. Some, like the Kaleth from the Draxian sector, who had once been allies to the council, quietly began to doubt whether the humans were truly as weak as they had assumed. The humans, however, were already making their move. Wolf returned to Earth with a message. The time had come to prove that humanity would not be pushed aside any longer. His message spread across the planet, and the people, driven by a mix of fear, anger, and hope, began to mobilize. Ships were built, weapons were designed, and the military, once thought to be a primitive force, rapidly advanced its technology, adapting it to the needs of interstellar warfare. Captain Wolf personally oversaw the development of a fleet, small yet agile, with advanced technology capable of overcoming the limitations that had once held humanity back. The fleet was designed not for brute force, but for cunning, speed, and adaptability. It would strike when least expected, and in ways the galaxy's greatest forces couldn't anticipate. The human fleet was ready to challenge the status quo. The first strike came with little warning. On the edge of council-controlled space, a peaceful mining colony, one that had no military value, suddenly came under attack. The invaders were human. The aliens, who had once dismissed humanity as nothing more than an annoyance, were stunned. They had assumed that humans would be unable to mount any serious offense without drawing attention. But this attack was different. The humans were fast and efficient, striking without mercy. The colony fell within hours. The council was forced to respond, but they were unsure how to react. They had never seen anything like it. The humans weren't just attacking, they were overwhelming their targets with precision and ruthlessness. For a species so young, they seemed to have an uncanny ability to exploit the weaknesses of their enemies. The council convened again, this time with an urgency that had not been present before. "This is an act of war," one of the leaders declared. "We cannot allow this to continue. We must unite," another said, its voice filled with a cold, calculating resolve. "The humans must be crushed before they can spread further." But there was hesitation in the room. Many of the council members had long prided themselves on their technological superiority. The human surprising strike had shaken them, but they still believed that their advanced fleets and weapons would ultimately be enough to crush any human resistance. Captain Wolf had anticipated this, though. As the council scrambled to put together a response, Wolf's forces had already begun to prepare for their next move. While the council leaders deliberated over the best course of action, human ships slipped through the cracks in the galaxy's defenses. Their first target, the planet Draktar, a world rich in resources and vital to the council's military manufacturing. It was the kind of place that, once destroyed, would cripple the entire galaxy's war efforts. Wolf's strategy was simple: hit them where it hurt. Draktar was considered one of the safest worlds under council control, but humanity had learned to adapt quickly, using guerrilla tactics to gain an upper hand. The human fleet arrived in the dead of night, slipping past the planet's defenses and striking with ruthless precision. By the time the council realized what was happening, it was already too late. The planet's key resource centers were destroyed, its military defenses shattered. The Council's pride, which had once been unshakable, now seemed fragile. They watched helplessly as their once secure empire began to show cracks. The humans were not just surviving, they were thriving. Captain Wolf had made it clear that humanity was not just a threat, they were a force to be reckoned with. As the weeks went by, more and more planets began to fall to humanity's relentless assault. The human fleet, though small, had become a shadow, striking quickly and without warning, never staying in one place long enough for the Council to retaliate. Every victory sent shockwaves through the galaxy, as more species began to question the supposed invincibility of the Council. On the home front, humanity began to unite like never before. The threat of galactic domination had brought them together, and the government, once divided, now stood as one. The people of Earth were no longer divided by borders, nations, or politics. They had a common enemy, and that enemy was the Galactic Council. In a small control room deep within Earth's military complex, Captain Wolf sat in front of a series of holographic maps. His team worked tirelessly, tracking the movements of Council forces and preparing for the next phase of their campaign. Wolf's eyes remained focused, his mind calculating each step with precision. He knew that humanity's strength was not just in their numbers or technology, but in their unyielding will to survive. And that would be their greatest weapon. "Get ready," Wolf said, his voice steady. "The next phase begins tomorrow. We will hit them where it hurts the most." As the final preparations were made, the entire human fleet stood ready to face the Council head-on. They were not afraid. They were no longer the underdogs. They had proved that they were more than capable of standing up to the most powerful force in the galaxy. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and now they would pay the price. The situation was becoming dire for the Galactic Council. What had once seemed like a brief, contained nuisance had transformed into an all-out war. Human forces, small but growing, had begun to hit critical targets all over the galaxy, leaving the Council scrambling to defend their vast empire. They had underestimated the humans, something that was beginning to cost them dearly. The Council's leaders gathered once again, their faces grim. The once confident discussions now felt like desperate strategizing. Each new defeat made the Council members question their initial assumptions. Humanity wasn't just a potential threat, they were rapidly becoming an unstoppable force. "We've lost Draktar," the leader of the Zelnar said in a low, angry tone. "That planet was essential to our military production. We can't let this continue." Another member, the T-Czar from the Voxian Alliance, nodded gravely. "We can't keep reacting to their attacks. We need to launch a full-scale counterattack, but their unpredictability is a problem. Their tactics are unlike anything we've seen before." The Council was right to be concerned. Humanity's unpredictability was their greatest strength. While the Council's military strategy relied on strict, organized movements and heavy use of advanced technology, the humans had adopted guerrilla warfare, turning the galaxy into their battleground. It was this ruthlessness and adaptability that made them so dangerous. And as Wolf's fleet continued to strike, the human resistance only grew stronger. Back on Earth, humans had rallied behind their cause in ways no one had expected. The fight against the Council was no longer just a matter of military action. It had become a symbol of survival, freedom, and defiance. Humanity had become more united than ever before. The division that had plagued their past seemed to vanish as they faced a common enemy. Wolf's leadership and vision gave them the strength to keep pushing forward, but the battle was far from over. The Council finally decided to act. They knew they couldn't let humanity's boldness continue unchecked. The T-Czar spoke again, a plan forming in their mind. "We must strike at their heart. We take Earth, destroy the source of their rebellion, and this war will be over." "Earth," the Zorvok leader, the most powerful figure in the Council, raised an eyebrow. "We'd risk too much. Their homeworld is heavily defended. And the human fleet, though unpredictable, is more than capable of putting up a fight." "We don't have a choice," the T-Czar insisted. "If we don't end this now, humanity will continue to grow stronger. We've given them time to rally and regroup. We can't afford that. A single, decisive strike, an assault on Earth, will break their spirit." With that, the Council approved the plan. They would launch an all-out attack on Earth, bringing their greatest fleets to bear against the humans in a battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy. As the Council's forces mobilized, Captain Wolf was already aware of their plans. His spies had intercepted Council communications, and he knew Earth was about to face its greatest challenge. He called a meeting with his top commanders in the underground war room beneath the Earth's surface. The room was filled with holographic maps of the galaxy, with lines of movement tracing the paths of the approaching enemy fleets. Wolf stood at the center, his face serious but resolute. "We knew this day would come," he said, his voice steady. "The Council thinks we're weak. They think they can crush us with one strike. They're wrong. We've prepared for this." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Our fleet is strong, but it's not enough to hold off their entire armada. We'll have to use everything we've learned about their tactics against them. We'll take the fight to them just like we've done before. We'll be unpredictable. We'll make them fight on our terms." Wolf's words resonated with the room. His leadership had turned what was once a desperate struggle into a fierce rebellion. The humans had learned the importance of adaptability, of quick thinking in the heat of battle. They no longer relied solely on their ships or weapons. Their greatest asset was their resilience, their refusal to back down in the face of overwhelming odds. But even with this advantage, Wolf knew the stakes were higher than ever before. The Council's fleets were massive, far larger than anything humanity had ever faced. If they failed to hold Earth, the galaxy would be lost to them. "We'll launch our counteroffensive in 2 phases, Wolf continued, his eyes scanning the faces of his commanders. "First, we need to slow down their advance. We'll hit their supply lines and cripple their ships. Then once they're committed to their assault, we'll strike back with everything we have." The commanders nodded, already preparing for the task ahead. There was no time to waste. Meanwhile, far above Earth, the Council's fleets began their descent. Hundreds of ships, each one a symbol of their technological superiority, moved toward the human homeworld. The sheer scale of the assault was staggering. The galaxy had never seen an invasion like this. The Council was determined to crush the humans in one final, devastating blow. But they had underestimated the one thing that made humanity so dangerous: their spirit. As the Council's fleet approached Earth, they were met not with fear, but with determination. The human forces on the ground and in space were ready. They had prepared for this moment their entire lives. The first battle began on Earth's outer atmosphere, where human ships clashed with the Council's advanced fleets in a flurry of laser fire and explosions. The human ships were smaller, faster, and more agile, but they were still outgunned by the sheer firepower of the Council's armada. Yet the humans were relentless. They fought not just for survival, but for something far greater: their freedom. Captain Wolf watched from his command center as the battle unfolded on the massive screens before him. His fingers drummed against the arm of his chair as he waited for the signal. "Phase 1 is in motion," he said quietly. "Now we wait." The battle raged on for hours, with each side taking heavy losses. The Council's fleets were powerful, but the human forces were holding their ground. Every move they made was carefully calculated, designed to give them an edge over the more advanced enemy. The Council was beginning to realize that humanity was not as easy to defeat as they had thought. As the battle reached its peak, Captain Wolf gave the order: "Phase 2, all ships full assault." With that, the human fleet launched their final strike. The Council's armada, caught off guard by the ferocity of the attack, was thrown into chaos. The human ships moved with the precision of a predator, attacking in waves, exploiting every weakness, every blind spot in the Council's defenses. It was a turning point, one that would be remembered for millennia to come. Humanity had proven that they were not to be underestimated, and as the Council's forces began to retreat, the humans knew that they had won the first major victory in a war that would shape the future of the galaxy. The battle had raged for hours, and Earth's defenses were showing signs of strain. The sky above the planet was filled with flashes of light from laser fire and explosions, as human and Council ships collided in the void. The humans, though outgunned and outnumbered, fought with a tenacity that the Council had never expected. Captain Wolf watched from his command center as the battle unfolded. His face was calm, but inside, his mind raced through the thousands of calculations that needed to be made in real time. His fleet had performed admirably, but he knew that if they couldn't turn the tide soon, Earth's survival would be in jeopardy. He had always known this moment would come, when humanity would have to face the might of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. but even he could not predict how far they would go to defend their home. The council had come with their full might. Massive ships that loomed over the human fleet, each one capable of wiping out entire cities with a single strike. The Tsar's flagship, the Tarnath, was the largest and most powerful of them all, its engines glowing with the power to crush anything that stood in its way. It hovered just above Earth's atmosphere, its weapons trained on the cities below. If the humans didn't stop it soon, Earth would be nothing more than a scorched rock. "Commander," Wolf said, turning to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Renat, who was monitoring the battle from another station. "What's the status of the outer defenses?" Renat's fingers flew across the console. "We're holding them off, Captain, but their firepower is overwhelming. If we don't take out their command ship, we'll be overrun." Wolf nodded grimly. The Tarnath was the heart of the Council's invasion force. If they could take it out, the rest of the fleet would fall apart. But it was heavily guarded, surrounded by dozens of smaller ships, each one more than capable of bringing down human vessels. It would be a suicide mission for any ship that tried to approach it directly. "We need to get creative," Wolf said, his mind already working on a new plan. "We're not going to fight them head-on. We'll hit them where they least expect it." Renat's eyes widened as she understood what he meant. "You're suggesting a strike on the Tarnath's weak point." "It's risky, but it could work." Wolf's expression remained focused. "Exactly. We'll use our speed and agility to get past their defenses. No direct assault, we'll be ghosts in the system. We hit fast and we hit hard. We won't give them a chance to react." The plan was bold, but Wolf knew it was their only chance. Humanity's strength lay not in brute force, but in their ability to adapt and outthink their opponents. He had no doubts that they could pull it off, but the risk was enormous. Meanwhile, the Council's forces continued to press their attack. Their ships surged forward, pushing the human fleet back inch by inch. The Tarnath fired its powerful cannons at Earth cities, sending shockwaves across the surface. Wolf could see the destruction unfolding on his monitors, but he refused to let it deter him. Earth would not fall today, not while he still breathed. On Earth's surface, the situation was just as dire. Cities that had once stood tall and proud were now reduced to ruins. The massive energy shields that protected the planet flickered as they absorbed the brunt of the Council's assault, but they couldn't hold forever. Civilians ran for cover, their lives disrupted by the chaos above them. The government had mobilized every available resource to fight back, but their efforts were no match for the advanced technologies of the Council. In the heart of the chaos, people were coming together in ways they never had before. Soldiers, engineers, scientists, and civilians, everyone was united by the same cause, to protect their home and their future. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving to the galaxy that humanity would not be crushed under the weight of those who saw them as insignificant. Back in space, Wolf's fleet prepared for the daring strike. The smaller, faster human ships moved into position, each one carrying the weight of humanity's hopes. Wolf knew that their success or failure would determine the future of their species. "All units, prepare for Phase 2, Wolf ordered. "Target the Tarnath's weak point and move quickly. We have one shot at this." The fleet spread out, each ship moving with precision and purpose. The Council's forces were momentarily distracted by the sudden shift in tactics. It was the opening Wolf had been waiting for. The human ships darted forward, weaving through the chaos, their speed making them difficult targets. They weren't firing directly. They were baiting the Council's ships, drawing them away from the target. As they neared the Tarnath, the human ships split into smaller groups. Wolf's plan was to strike from multiple angles, making it impossible for the Council to defend themselves effectively. They would hit fast, with surgical precision, before the enemy could react. Wolf's own ship, the Vigilance, was leading the charge. Its hull was battered from previous engagements, but it was still running strong. The Tarnath loomed ahead, its massive form almost suffocating in its size. Wolf's heart raced as they approached their target. The Tarnath's weak point was located in its rear thruster, a small, almost invisible spot that was heavily shielded. It was a vulnerability that even the Council's experts had overlooked. The humans had studied the Tarnath for weeks, and now they were going to exploit its weakness. "Steady," Wolf murmured to himself. "This is it." The human ships moved into position, firing bursts of energy to confuse the enemy and draw attention away from their real objective. Wolf's ship accelerated toward the rear of the Tarnath, narrowly avoiding a barrage of enemy fire. The shields flickered, but they held. "Almost there," Wolf whispered, his fingers gripping the controls. With a sharp turn, the Vigilance slid into position. Wolf's eyes locked onto the weak point. He gave the order. "Fire!" A single shot rang out, a brilliant beam of energy slamming into the Tarnath's rear thruster. The shields protecting it flared bright before collapsing, leaving the thruster exposed. The impact was enough to send shockwaves through the Tarnath systems, causing its engines to sputter. The Tarnath shuddered, its massive form now vulnerable. The rest of the human fleet descended like a swarm of locusts, striking at the exposed weak point with everything they had. The Council's leaders were thrown into disarray. Their most powerful ship was crippled, and the human fleet, emboldened by their success, pressed the attack with renewed vigor. The tide of the battle was beginning to turn. Wolf watched the chaos unfold from his ship, a sense of triumph swelling in his chest. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the moment when the Council's arrogance would be shattered. They had underestimated humanity for too long, and now they were paying the price. But Wolf knew this was just the beginning. There were still many battles ahead, and the Council wouldn't give up easily. But humanity had proven something fundamental. They would never back down, no matter how overwhelming the odds. As the Tarnath began to crumble, its shields failing, the human fleet pressed forward. The Council had come to Earth expecting an easy victory, but they had underestimated the resilience of humanity. The fight was far from over, but today, humanity had struck a blow that the galaxy would never forget. The Council's defeat at the hands of humanity had shocked the galaxy. The Tarnath, once the symbol of their dominance, lay crippled in space, its once mighty engines flickering as if they were struggling to breathe. The human fleet, battered but victorious, circled the broken vessel like a pack of wolves closing in on a weakened prey. The momentum had shifted, and the Council knew it. The galaxy, which had once been in their iron grip, was no longer as secure as it once had been. In the command center aboard the Vigilance, Captain Adrian Wolf stared at the holographic display in front of him. The Tarnath was just the beginning. They had broken the Council's first line of defense, but there was still a war to win. He knew that the victory they had just achieved was not the end. It was only the start of something much larger. "Captain," Lieutenant Renaz's voice broke through his thoughts. "We've intercepted another transmission from the Council. They're calling for reinforcements. They're not finished yet." Wolf nodded, his face stern. "I know, this battle is far from over. But we've shown them what we're capable of. They won't underestimate humanity again." The human fleet was scattered across the battlefield, engaging in a series of smaller skirmishes with the remaining Council forces. Some of the Council ships had retreated, but others, including the Tarnath's surviving escorts, were regrouping for another strike. The Council wasn't going to back down easily, but Wolf had no intention of letting them gain ground. Earth had survived the first wave, but now came the real challenge, pushing the Council back and making sure they could never threaten humanity again. As Wolf prepared for the next stage of the battle, his thoughts were with the civilians on Earth. The planet had been under attack for days now, and while the military had managed to fend off the worst of the assault, the cost had been high. Many cities were in ruins, and countless lives had been lost. The fight for Earth wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for the future of humanity itself. Across the globe, people had rallied in ways no one had expected. Ordinary civilians, once hidden behind the comfort of their everyday lives, had become warriors in their own right. They worked alongside the military, providing supplies, helping rebuild damaged infrastructure, and even taking up arms to defend their homes. Humanity was united like never before. As the battle in space continued, Wolf's fleet continued to harass the remaining Council forces. They were making small, targeted attacks on the Council's command ships, aiming to break their chain of command. Wolf knew that if they could disrupt the Council's ability to coordinate, the rest of the battle would fall apart. But it was a delicate balance. One wrong move could lead to disastrous consequences. "Phase 2 is ready," Renaz said, her voice filled with determination. "We've located their next wave of reinforcements. We can hit them before they reach our perimeter." Wolf looked up at her, a faint smile crossing his face. "Good, let's finish this." The human fleet moved into position, using the cover of the asteroid fields to remain hidden from the approaching Council ships. Their strategy was simple: attack, overwhelm, and retreat before the Council could respond. It was guerrilla warfare at its finest, fast, brutal, and unpredictable. The humans had learned that their greatest strength wasn't in matching the Council's firepower, but in their ability to outmaneuver and outthink their enemies. As the first wave of Council ships entered the asteroid field, the human ships emerged from their hiding spots, attacking with precision. The Council forces, caught off guard, tried to regroup, but it was too late. Human fighters darted in and out of the enemy's defenses, targeting weak spots and disabling key systems. The Council ships, which had once been unstoppable, were now vulnerable. Wolf's tactics had turned the tide. "Direct hit," one of the officers shouted. "We've taken down one of their lead ships." The human fleet cheered, but Wolf remained focused. The battle was far from won. The Council was regrouping, and reinforcements were on their way. If they didn't act fast, the advantage would slip away. Wolf's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden transmission. A familiar voice crackled through the comms. It was General Kor of the Grawn, an alien species that had once been an ally to the Council but had secretly sided with humanity. The Grawn had been instrumental in providing valuable intelligence about the Council's operations. "We've detected a massive wave of reinforcements," General Kor said. "They're coming straight for Earth. You don't have much time." Wolf's heart skipped a beat. Earth was still vulnerable. If the Council succeeded in bringing their full force to bear on the planet, there was no telling how much damage they could do. The human fleet was small compared to the Council's full might, and Earth's defenses were already stretched thin. But Wolf wasn't ready to give up. Not yet, not ever. "Prepare for a final strike," he ordered. "We're not just defending Earth, we're going to take the fight to them." With the Grawn's help, Wolf's fleet moved toward the incoming reinforcements. The Council had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated the humans' resolve. Now they were about to pay the price. The final battle was about to begin. Wolf knew it wouldn't be easy, but he also knew that humanity had come too far to back down now. The Council had underestimated them, and they were about to find out just how wrong they had been. As the two fleets prepared to clash, Wolf's mind raced. He had one final plan, one last chance to defeat the Council once and for all. The plan was risky, but if it worked, it would ensure humanity's victory and send a message to the galaxy. Humanity would never be anyone's pawn again. With a deep breath, Wolf gave the order. "All ships, full assault. Hit them hard and hit them fast. We finish this today." The human fleet surged forward, every ship moving with a singular purpose. The Council's ships, still regrouping, struggled to respond. The humans hit them from all sides, attacking with the precision and ferocity that had made them so dangerous. For the first time, the Council's ships began to retreat. The tide of the battle had completely turned. As the last of the Council's forces fell back, Wolf looked out over the battlefield. Earth was still standing. The human fleet, battered but undefeated, had won. The Council had been forced to retreat, and humanity had proven that they could defend their home, no matter the cost. Wolf stood in silence for a moment, letting the weight of their victory sink in. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about declaring to the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated, that they would never again be pushed aside. The war was over, but the message had been sent. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and they were here to stay.